Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Respawn Lounge, where we're going to be talking about Fire Emblem. Okay, so I think Fire Emblem's the coolest. And also this is very timely because Fire Emblem Heroes just came out.
True.
Have either of you played that?
No. I've heard it suffers from the traditional mobile game problems, though.
It suffers from being on phones.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It also suffers from Nintendo just not really knowing how to optimize for mobile. Isn't it a huge battery hog?
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
It wiped my battery in like an hour and a half, and I have like a pretty new phone.
Yeah, and also it does the really cool thing that Miitomo does, where you download the app and then you download more when you open the app.
I had three separate downloads before I finished the prologue. Now, granted, the initial download was the biggest by far.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't remember, like 1.5 gigs or something, and then it was like 200 megabytes and then like 30 megabytes. So it was like pretty inconsequential, but still.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the series from basically the beginning because I know a lot about Fire Emblem, and I'm going to try to since I think I know more than both of you.
Yes, by far.
I don't think you guys have played the older or the Japanese ones.
Not at all.
So I'm just going to kind of give a history of it. You guys feel free to just chime in and ask questions or whatever.
Okay.
So the series started in 1990, and it was produced by Gunpei Yokoi, the guy who designed and created the Game Boy, and it was designed and directed by Shozo Kaga, who's the person who created the first 5 Fire Emblem games, none of which came out in the US. But the very first game, Fire Emblem Anko Kuryu to Hikari no Eyu, or Shadow Dragon and the Sword of Light, was the first game to feature Marth, who's kind of the face of the series.
Mm-hmm.
So that game was later remade in the US under the title Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon for the DS. So we do have access to functionally the series' roots, although Shadow Dragon it was kind of panned in the US because it is a remake of a 1990 Famicom game, and it shows.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at it as the perspective of being a remake of that game, it's actually excellent, I think, because it takes a lot of the characters and makes them, balanced in a more meaningful way. For example, in the original game, the Knight class, the Armor Knights, could not promote. General was a totally separate class, and I think that you could only recruit one in the entire game, and that wasn't until Endgame when you got Lorenz. So using a lot of characters from the start for the length of the game was like kind of a bad idea. But then you ran into the issue where most of the characters that you gain throughout the game aren't great. Your starting squad is pretty much like as good as you're going to get. And that was rebalanced in Shadow Dragon, where two of the best characters you get on chapter 5 or 6 or so when you meet Hardin's crew and you get the Wolf Guard, because Wolf and Seedger are both incredibly strong characters, despite falling into the archetype of being the pre-promote, like, low stat if you had raised another character up to their level. But Wolf has, like, I think it's 100 or 110% chance to gain strength on every level up.
Okay.
110 meaning he will get 1, and then he has a 10% chance to gain 2.
Yeah.
So very, very quickly, he becomes one of the most powerful characters. And he has the benefit of starting with good weapons, starting with a horse, as opposed to your alternative, which is to use Castor, who's the only hunter you get in Shadow Dragon, and promoting him. If you average out their stats with their starting gains, how many levels they have to gain, being able to promote Castor, Wolf still ends up better. So it does a lot of stuff like that where characters are... The characters that are prevalent in the story and strong, or powerful characters based on the context of the story, actually are the more powerful characters.
That's cool. That sounds, that sort of design sounds much more like what the, I guess, at least more recent ones. I mean, talking about the Sacred Stones, which is the other one I've played in addition to
recent 2004.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was.
I played Sacred Stones and Awakening.
Yeah. I didn't know you played Awakening.
Yeah, I played most of it. I borrowed it from a friend of ours.
Okay. I've also played Awakening, and I'm not going to bash Awakening. I have done that enough. I actually have good things to say about Awakening for a change.
Oh, that's nice.
So I'll get around to that. But yeah, Sacred Stones is good about the characters who are strong in the story are the strongest characters, for the most part. Mm-hmm. The exception to that rule is that the trainee characters end up being very, very good, too. A lot of people like to make fun of... Do you remember Amelia? The one that... She's the girl in the red armor and the blonde hair, who promotes into either a cavalier or a knight.
Yeah.
And then, like, both branches of that. But she starts out really weak, and you get her at about mid-game. Mm-hmm. People make fun of her for being a bad character, which is relative to Seth, who's an outstanding character. And I'm going to go into archetypes of, like, why Seth is good, too. But Amelia is still incredibly good. Ewan is also incredibly good. The pupil, the mage character you get with Saleh. And the other one is... what's his name? The axe guy you get with Garcia's son.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember his name.
I don't remember his name, but yeah, his crazy throwing axes.
Yeah, he starts with a hatchet, and you can actually get him to level 10 in the chapter after you recruit him, and he'll promote right then and there and be leagues better than Garcia.
Yeah, I remember playing through that, because the chapter after you get him is full of walls, but for some reason he can attack through walls.
Yeah, because bows and magic and throwing axes will go through walls, and javelins.
Yeah, so I just would walk him, like, in absolute no danger, just walked him through the level, just obliterating everybody through walls, and like leveled up like 5 times or something before I got to the end of the level.
Yeah, you can actually get him up 9 levels, up to level 10 in there.
Yeah.
If he's the only one who attacks any enemy until the final boss of that level. And even then, I think you only need to whack him a few times. It's either that or you need to get the kill with him. You don't have to do all the damage.
Yeah.
But because he's a trainee class character, he just levels up much faster than your other ones because he's functionally in negative levels when you get him. And levels are scaled based on what level you are. And also, if people listening to this somehow don't know, Fire Emblem is a strategy RPG. I don't know if that's been made clear, but you gain levels, keep up with equipment that degrades, which has been true in almost every game. The most recent game, it's not true.
Really?
Yeah, in Fates, you have Bronze Sword, which has no qualities except that it can't do criticals, but it has like even damage. And then you have the Iron Sword, which it can do criticals, but I think it's like speed -1 or something. And Steel Sword is stronger, but speed -3, and that's how they balance them instead of being just steals better invariably.
Okay, so it's not a resource management thing, it's a strategical decision thing.
Right, which I don't care a lot for Fates, but that's something that I think is an enormous improvement over the series, because there's nothing more annoying than in Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon when you have 65 iron swords that all have 5 uses left that's not worth carrying, and you just, like, dump them all. But in Shadow Dragon, one of the improvements they make over Anko Kuryu is that you can combine using the merge function. Like if you have a 5 out of 46 iron sword and a 10 out of 46, you can merge them into a 15 out of 46 one sword. Okay. So you get like a single sword out of the like remaining points of the previous ones.
Yeah.
Which is way better than selling them for insignificant amounts of money or just letting them clutter your inventory, which is what it is in almost every other game.
Yeah.
So after Anko Kuryu, which is... Anko Kuryu sets a lot of standards for the series, too. Having the hero, the Lord character, being not that strong, but, crucial to the plot, and also, gets a weapon that makes him good. Because stat-wise, Marth is not amazing. He's outclassed by Cain and Abel and Gordon and everybody else. It also introduces I guess it introduces everything because it's the first game, but it also has the Jagan archetype, which is when the game gives you a powerful character at the start who appears to be really strong, but in actuality they have horrible growth rates and they'll be like an average of 2 stats better than the comparative characters, because Jagan is a paladin, and you also start with 2 cavaliers, which promote into paladins. And Jagan's stronger than both of them, but only by a few points. So by the time they've leveled up a few times, they overshadow Jagan. And they also have the benefit of having way more room to grow and getting the bonus from promoting.
Yeah.
So if you have Cain and Abel as level 1 paladins and Jagan as a level 1 paladin, their stats should be 3 times higher than his. And also he has bad growth rates. So even if you use Jagan for the entire game, he's just not going to be very good at endgame. Like, probably won't even damage the enemies.
That same sort of thing's true for most of the other Fire Emblem games too, isn't it?
So there are two archetypes that fall into that like kind of subcategory, because there's also the Oife archetype, which is the same thing, but that character actually is good.
Okay.
And that begins in Fire Emblem 4, Saisen no Keifu, Genealogy of the Holy War, where you get a character named Oife in the second generation, because the way that game works is you have the first generation, which is 5 chapters, an event happens, and then you play as their children in the second generation. And Oife was a child in the first, so now he's like an adult and a paladin in the second, so he's a pre-promoted character, but he's also very strong. So then you have those two archetypes where you have either the Jagan, who is utter trash and you shouldn't even bother, and then you have the Oife, who's still like probably not as good long term as the others, but if you bring him to endgame, he'll still be fine.
Yeah.
So the one that you played, Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, Seth is an Oife character.
Yeah.
He won't be as strong as Franz or Kyle or Ford, but he'll still be fine at endgame.
Yeah, because I remember using him because obviously being like a child who didn't have access to the internet, I had no reason to know that this character would be terrible or anything like that. But luckily he wasn't, so it turned out fine for me.
Yeah, and it turns out, especially in Sacred Stones, people say that game's really easy, and it is.
Yeah.
But a lot of that has to do with the fact that almost every character is good. Versus, say, Fire Emblem 7, where about half the cast is almost unusable. Or Fire Emblem 6, where half the cast is actually unusable. Because you have, in Fire Emblem 6, you have a character named Marcus. So Fire Emblem 6 is so 7 is a prequel to that game. And in 7, you have a young Marcus in your party who acts as the Jagan of the game. So he's bad. But you have an older, shittier Marcus in 6 who's somehow worse. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's move on to Fire Emblem 2, Fire Emblem Gaiden, which came out in, I want to say, 1991 in Japan for the Famicom.
And they just announced the remake, sort of. Like a remake and a half, I think.
It's a reimagining, they call it.
Yeah.
Which is good because that game doesn't deserve to be remade 1-to-1, because it's not very good. And I say that as probably one of the biggest Fire Emblem fans that I've ever interacted with. Like, I haven't met a lot of people who've played the Japanese games, and the ones that have played Genealogy and not the others or something. So I only say that to give context to why I'm so confident and why I feel how I feel about these games. And Gaiden is absolute butthole.
Okay. So
what Gaiden does is, and for people who don't know, Gaiden is functionally the Japanese word for side story. And a lot of people don't realize that Gaiden is actually a side story of Fire Emblem Anko-Koryu. Because you actually get 3 of the characters from the first game, the White Wings, Est, Katria, and Pala, who are the 3 Pegasus sisters. And also that's another archetype that was introduced in Anko-Koryu, was the 3 characters who, if you have them in the triangle formation, they do an automatic critical on the enemy. That was actually in the NES game. And they're back in Gaiden and equally broken. Which is good, because no one else in that game is good, except for the main characters. So Gaiden makes a lot of really strange balance changes and choices and stuff. It has 3-tier promotion. So you have Cavalier to Paladin to Gold Knight, things like that.
Yeah.
But it also makes it so your the levels that you gain upon level up are abysmal. So when you promote, instead of getting +1 to strength, +2 to magic, and so forth, your stats hike up to match the base stats of whatever the class you're promoting into is. So if you're a class and you have 6 strength and you promote into a class that has a base of 10, yours goes to 10, no matter where it started. Okay. The only exception is if yours is higher, then you keep the higher one. So what that does is it makes it so the difference between 10 levels and a promotion is nothing. There's no reason not to promote immediately, because grinding in this game also takes forever. So what you get is you'll start running into enemy characters who are promoted to be bosses, who are sometimes impossible to kill if you haven't also promoted, because their stat tier is just A, they're bosses, so they're stronger, and B, they're a class and their base stats are much higher than you can ever even hope to have. So The answer to that is usually like, oh, well, they're an armor character, so use magic. Well, magic, since you also don't have weapon degradation in this game, the way they balance magic is it drains your health to cast spells.
Oh, okay.
So you'll kill yourself trying to hit these enemies, which sucks because mages are also vulnerable to physical attacks, and archers can attack from 3 spaces away instead of 2 now.
Oh, awesome.
So is the same thing true of like priests? Like how do you heal people? Do you hurt yourself to heal people?
Yes. Also, you can miss. And healing's not as bad. It's like lose 1 health to heal like a number equal to your magic stat or something.
Okay.
Which isn't so bad. But when you can miss, it is bad.
Yeah.
And that's only been in one other Fire Emblem game, Throsta 776, the sequel to Genealogy. And that's like reason number 3 why I don't like that game. But we'll get to that. So Gaiden makes a couple other big changes. For example, it only has 5 chapters, or it has like a prologue and endgame and 3 in between chapters. And for the first chapter, you're playing as a character named Ulm and his army. And when you get to the end, which is like, you know, moving like based on a world map, like you go to this section and this section, this village.
Yeah.
And you'll run into random skirmishes sometimes, or you run into events or wandering monsters and things like that. And when you go to towns, you actually get to go into it like it's a JRPG and walk around and talk to people, discover secrets and things like that.
That's nice.
And you can go into dungeons where you'll have a random encounter rate where you'll have to participate in a battle. Now, granted, it's really low because the battles are long. So, like, if you're going through the endgame dungeon, you run into, like, maybe 3 or 4 random battles.
Yeah.
So it's not that horrible. Other than that, it's, like, balanced like garbage.
Yeah.
But the actual, like, stonewalling of your progression is not so bad. That's pretty much it for Gaiden. I don't have a lot of positive to say about it. It does a lot of ideas that are kind of interesting, but, like...
executed poorly.
And it's following that weird Nintendo tradition of, like, sequels have nothing to do with the original games. Like, Zelda 2 being so weird, and Metroid 2 being weird, Mario 2 was so different, things like that. Fortunately, Fire Emblem 3, which was Mancho no Nazo, Mystery of the Emblem, goes back to its roots by being a remake of its roots.
Oh, well, that'll do it.
Yeah, so Mystery of the Emblem is a remake of Fire Emblem Enko Kuryu, and also a sequel, all in one cartridge.
Okay.
They're not, like... It's not just an extended story. You actually choose when you start the game, do you want to play Book 1 or Book 2? Book 1 is the remake, Book 2 is the sequel.
That's nice. Okay.
So Book 1 is... it's not one-to-one. For one, it balances the characters differently, and the gameplay is a little bit different. Instead of having your weapon skill, like whether you're able to use silver swords and things like that, instead of basing that on like how often you've used the sword to like get up to an A or a B or whatever, it's actually just a level like your strength is, like your strength and skill and so forth. So you randomly gain like points in the weapon level stat.
Okay.
What that means is you can just be able to use silver swords with all your characters on Chapter 3 if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Which is a horrible, broken mess. And terrible. Another thing is mages have close to 0 or literally 0 chance to raise their strength. Strength being magic for them.
Awesome.
So mages never get stronger. Except upon promotion. Now, that's all the more reason to invest your like energy rings into them to raise their magic stat. But the difference with the other games is enemies also have like a 1% chance to gain resistance, which is how you like diminish magic damage. So they never get stronger, but neither do the enemies' defenses to your magic.
Okay.
And it doesn't drain your health this time, thankfully.
Yeah.
Other changes is characters who previously weren't able to promote now can. Drog can now promote into a general. I believe they did something to make Marth stronger, but I don't remember what it was.
You gave him better hair.
Yeah, also the graphics are better. This is where they get into the Super Nintendo.
Okay.
In the sequel, which is kind of lauded as one of the better games in the franchise, and having played it for the first time within the past year, I think I agree. Other than the weapon level thing being an imbalanced, like, dramatic mess.
Yeah.
The plot is surprisingly good for a sequel to a game that didn't have a whole lot of a plot in the first place. So, one of the characters that you fight in Enko Koryu is someone named Camus the Sable, who is your like. He's the one that helped the Princess Nina in the first game escape to Marth so that she could overthrow the kingdom. But he's, the tried and true knight who can't betray his kingdom and begrudgingly has to fight Marth.
Okay.
So he gets defeated and presumably killed. But early on in the sequel in Book 2, you actually find a character named Sirius who's just him wearing a mask. With amnesia and so forth. Also, he's in Gaiden, but they don't really talk about it. It's him. It's canonically him. They just totally gloss over it though.
Okay.
So it's the Dark Dragon Medius has come back to such and such or whatever. Someone else is trying to summon him this time, so you have to go recruit all the characters from the previous game except for a few. You cannot recruit the Wolf Guard this time, so you don't get Wolf, Segur, Roshea, Violend, or Harden. Harden's actually a primary villain now.
Okay.
And he was he was like the deuteragonist of the first game. So it's really interesting to just because one of the central themes is that Marth wouldn't let anybody in his army die, and that's why they're all in the sequel. So now you actually have to go kill people who were in your army previously.
Okay.
Early on in the game, Lorenz dies, who was one of the kind of central characters toward endgame of the first. Mm-hmm. And Bars and Cordon Board are not available.
Cordon Board?
Yeah.
They're really good at names, if you can tell.
Uh-huh.
In the first game, Marth's original name was Mars because he was the god of war. And, his artwork, he looked like it.
In his artwork, he had no pants.
Nope. And he had gladiator sandals. It was horrible.
Interesting.
No, that's why Martha's hot. It's because he doesn't wear pants.
Uh-huh.
It was... And I was actually talking to Benny about this yesterday. I've noticed that Fire Emblem's aesthetic has always kind of matched the anime of the time. So, the 90s anime, your, Gundams and stuff like that, where people had, giant pompadours, that's what the art style looked like in Fire Emblem. Whereas now, anime is much more, kind of polished-looking, moe and, the kind of the big-eyed, bug-looking girls, that kind of art style is the norm now, and that's what Fire Emblem's starting to look like.
Yeah, I can see that.
Which is not unique to Fire Emblem. That's kind of true of a lot of JRPGs, but it is a trend that I didn't notice until yesterday. So, I guess that's pretty much it for 3. You recruit most of the old characters, beat the big bad dragon again, yada yada. 4 is where the series starts to get really interesting, and it's also what I think is the peak of Shozo Kaga's work, who again is the director of the first 5 entries in the franchise. Mm-hmm. So this is still on Super Nintendo, and in this game they tried to do what Gaiden did, but succeeded this time. You only have 10 chapters, or I think 12 technically, if you count prologues and endgames. So you have prologue through chapter 5. You're playing as a character named Sigurd, and it's kind of the Game of Thrones politics sort of game. Whereas the other ones were just beat a bad dragon. This one you actually see betrayal and characters will kill each other and things like that. Mm-hmm. You have a much smaller army. I think Sigurd's army maxes out at it's either 12 or 14 characters, as opposed to, for example, Fire Emblem 6, you get 80. But the difference is you use every single character on every single mission. When a chapter starts, you're sortying in a castle, and you have all of your characters. There's a village there's a shop, there's an arena for you to level up, and things like that. And then you send all your characters out, and each chapter will be a year-long campaign against one of the enemy castles. Okay. So you might take 3 or 4 castles. You might take a castle and have it taken back. There might be a completely separate battle happening way off on screen somewhere. Mm-hmm. And you'll interact with a lot of key figures. So one of the, again, the title, Saisen no Keifu, Genealogy of the Holy War. Genealogy is playing into, the bloodline element. A lot of characters have the blood of one of the 12 Crusaders. I think it's called the 12 Crusaders. So you have, for example, Fala was the Crusader who used fire. So the ultimate fire weapon is called Fala Flame. There was Seti, Seti, who had... crap, I can't remember. I think it was called Excalibur, which doesn't make sense for that to be a spell and not a sword. But there were 12 characters whose bloodlines were basically the 12 major kingdoms. So your army consists of Sigurd, who has one such bloodline, and then 7 or 8 other characters have them, and then your enemies are going to be the leaders who have the other bloodlines and will have those most powerful weapons. So on chapter 5 is when your characters all start to get like the Nidhogg's and the Gaybolgs and like the really cool sounding ultimate weapons that are based on their bloodline. And throughout this game, you can pair them off with each other, which is kind of the finesse of because they had a support system in the previous games, and this is where they really started to fine tune that, and your characters will actually get married.
Yeah, the dating sim elements.
Yeah, except it's Game of Thronesy instead of Waifu Simulator.
Yeah.
Because even the girls have pompadours.
There's no petting mini game.
Yeah, not yet. So,
Yeah.
that's censorship, I guess, that I'm not worried about. So, in Chapter 5, and I don't want to spoil this game because I'm sure a lot of people haven't played it, but something happens, and you begin playing as the second generation. You'll play as the children of the previous army. So, if you... I think Sigurd is locked into marrying Daedre for plot reasons, and they'll have 2 children. One will be Seliph, who will be the leader of the next army in the second generation, and they'll have another a shaman daughter who is like one of the central moving plot elements. But everyone else will have, like, for every pair of 2 characters, like if you pair up Lex and Ira, they'll have 2 children, and they'll pass on both of their bloodlines onto their children. So you'll have major bloodlines and minor bloodlines. If you keep the bloodline pure, you'll have major, which will give you like a bigger stat boost to its respective category. Like if you have major Seti blood, it gives you -10 strength and +10 magic or something like that. But if you mix the bloodlines, you'll get half the quality of both of them. So you have a lot of control over how these characters are going to start leveling up, and you also pass on the base stat differentials between the parents and their weapons too. So, for example, if you have a silver sword with Sigurd, when the next part starts, Seliph will begin with a silver sword.
Okay, so weird fantasy genetics.
Yeah, it's a eugenics simulator. And I think I spent as much time when I started the game trying to plot out the most effective way to like breed these characters to have like good children in the second generation.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
That part of like the Fire Emblem games that like allow you to do that's always been really, really strange to me.
It's interesting.
Like
it's been used in other games too. Like,
yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it like floating around Steam. Like Record of the Agarest War takes a lot of inspiration from that. Mm-hmm. Except that one actually is like a waifu sim.
Yeah, I've seen the cover art for that one.
Yeah,
but like any sort of game where you have like characters have children, but you need to like be. You need to like min-max the children.
Well,
genetically, it's just really strange. I think.
Yeah, and you don't have to obviously.
Yeah.
Like the game is still perfectly beatable without like going through all this effort min-maxing things like that, because it's also possible for your characters to die and not have children, because it is still a Fire Emblem game with permadeath. So the way they remedy that is if your character either doesn't get married or dies, they have replacement characters who are the same class, but just won't get any of their weapons, won't get their stat changes, and won't get the major bloodlines.
Okay.
So you'll lose access to like the strongest weapons for those characters, and you won't get the bonuses to speed and stuff like that if you tried to min-max and deliberately pair them off. And also a lot of the pairings are like implied by the plot or like made clear in some capacity. Mm-hmm. And it's not like you can't have Finn marry literally every girl. He has the choice of like 2 or 3. So it's kind of hard to mess up, even though it looks really complex on the front of it. It's not so bad.
Okay.
And it's an excellent game, if not a kind of esoteric and difficult one.
Yeah.
So immediately after this is Shozokaga's final entry in the franchise, which is Fire Emblem Thrasha 776, which is the last one on the Super Nintendo as well, or Super Famicom rather. Fire Emblem has a habit of not being totally certain how it wants to like proceed with the franchise, because so far we've had Fire Emblem 1, which is what a lot of the modern Fire Emblems are based on. Gaiden, which was radically different. 3 was a remake. 4 was radically different. And 5 is different from that. So 5 entries in, and we still don't really have too much of a groundwork to see where the franchise is going to go. But we will see that with the next game. In Thracia 776, you're playing during the events that happened in between the 2 generations of the previous game.
Okay.
because some of the characters from the first generation do survive and participate in the second half. Finn is one of them.
So it's the 2.8 of the franchise.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
It's a Fire Emblem Chain of Memories.
Yeah.
So you play as kind of like an implied character that was very important in genealogy, but like didn't service the plot a whole lot. So Seliph becomes a Night Lord like Sigurd did in genealogy, but you have another character named Leif who becomes a Master Lord, who is far more powerful, has like the highest rank in every weapon type, can use almost every weapon, is just indisputably one of the strongest characters except for Seti. Oh, I do want to talk one more thing about genealogy. There's a character named Seti, who is Leywin's child, who has major Seti blood. He's named after, and his father was possessed by the god Seti. So in the game, he's actually like as powerful as that implies him to be. He's so strong that his speed level ups are like so astronomical that they'll like loop around themselves, and he'll go into negative speed, and then still gain enough speed to be the fastest character in the game again. He gains so much speed, he's faster than every other character twice over. It's really dumb.
So he's Sonic.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
He's Green Sonic, and also a man.
How does negative speed work?
So you have a speed cap, and for some reason there's a bug where if you level up past that cap with that one character,
it resets.
You revert back to 0. But when the next chapter starts, you'll get your base speed and the benefit from the weapon he's using, because he starts with like Seti's ultimate weapon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you're still just by your default speed stat faster than everybody, and then you level up again and your speed goes up super high again.
Okay, so just every once in a while you're slower than your absolute maximum possibility.
Yeah, there'll be like the beginning of a chapter where he's still faster than everybody, but still slow like relative to himself. And it's funny because I think I failed to like double attack one character one time, and I was like, what? And I looked at his speed and it was like 17 instead of 40, and I was like, what happened? So in Thracia, they really wanted to drive home the fact that like Leif was trying to avoid the enemy armies so that he could like rendezvous with Seliph. So you're fighting the remnants of the previous evil empire or whatever, while running around with only your starting sword. So what you do is you have a stat called Constitution, which you roll against the opponent when you attack them, and if you try to capture them, you take a penalty to your attack and your speed, and if you successfully kill them, you grab the character, and then you can take their weapons and items, and then you like release them.
Okay.
And you can do that to bosses, and some characters have to be recruited that way.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, except the game also likes to take away all your items a lot, so you never really get to a point where you have a satisfactory amount of equipment.
Yeah.
Because you also like don't find too terribly many weapons and chests. Most of the good weapons you have to like capture a boss and take their weapon and stuff, and it very quickly becomes like you're sacrificing strategy for stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting mechanic that just is too centralizing to the game, I think. Also, the game's hard as nails.
Yeah.
But you also get a lot of characters who are in genealogy, which is interesting because I always like games where you see what's happening off to the side of a previous game. Because you start with Leif and Finn, and you'll end up getting Evelyn, who was one of the characters from the first generation of genealogy. Mm-hmm. And you'll see like some of the parents, or like what happened to the parents in between that generation, like why aren't they fighting in the Second War and stuff like that. You'll find out why.
Yeah.
Other than that, not a lot to say about it. It follows the more traditional like Fire Emblem 1 format of being just like 20, 25-ish chapters or so. It's just really hard, and a lot of the chapters have really annoying prerequisites for finishing them. Oh, and also, characters have a fatigue stat after one point, where it's based on how many battles they participate in and how much health they use, but characters will get fatigued and be unusable for a chapter.
Okay.
So you can't do what you do in a lot of Fire Emblem games, where you'll have a cast of 50, and you use like 15 of them, so that you maximize their levels for endgame, and you just don't let them die, and you reset if they do. You have to use a variety of characters in Thracia, otherwise you're just not going to have a full party, because they'll get fatigued and you can't bring them.
Okay.
Which is a huge pain, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting, given the context of the game, it kind of fits. I just don't think it makes the game better.
Okay.
So I need to remember this game, this guy's name. It's something Wada was the one who started making the games after this point. Sachiko Wada. This is the director of Fire Emblem's 6, which is Fui no Tsurugi, the one with Roy from Super Smash Brothers. It's the one with him through Radiant Dawn. No, through New Mystery of the Emblem, because they remade the remake of Fire Emblem 1 too.
Okay.
And we'll get to that. So Fire Emblem 6 is where we start to lay the groundwork for, or not lay the groundwork, but like really iron out the Fire Emblem 1 formula. You've got 20, 25-ish chapters where you play as the protagonist who gets an item that makes him big, and then you beat the bad guy. And then you also have conditions to get to a secret finale as well. In this game, you follow Roy, who is the son of the Marquis of Faerie, Elwood, and you are kind of thrown into having to command the army of, like, functionally the United Nations, like the several groups of not evil empires who have teamed up to fight a potential evil empire.
Yeah.
So you end up having to lead this liberation army, and you're going through and you're like recruiting the royals and the higher up generals of all the other armies, trying to like take them away from the evil empire side. And then you eventually have to overthrow the villain Zephiel, who was the king of Bern, who like rose to power.
Burn.
King of Bern, like Bern.
Oh, okay.
He just set shit on fire.
He's a dragon.
Yeah.
Well, they do play into this game's plot with dragons a lot, because dragons have always been like part of Fire Emblem. Like obviously, like in Fire Emblem 1, Dark Dragon and the Sword of Light, the villain is Medius, a shadow dragon.
Yeah.
But otherwise, dragons haven't been hyper prevalent. In Genealogy and Thracia, one of the spells is Naga, which summons a dragon who is a god, and Naga is dominantly in a lot of the other games. In Fire Emblem 1, Naga was the like god dragon that teamed up with Marth's ancestor to overthrow the bad guy before in the past. And you actually get the daughter of Naga, Tiki, is one of your party members as well. And you'll see that in a lot of the games too. In Fire Emblem Awakening, Naga is an actual character you interact with, and you get Tiki again, because Awakening is a direct sequel to Fire Emblem 1. And in Shadow Dragon, you can actually recruit a character named Nagi, who's totally just Naga. They don't even try to hide it.
Okay.
So, anyway, in 6, and this isn't revealed until the next game, where you play at, like the prequel to this game, but canonically Roy is half dragon.
Okay.
Because the canon marriage for Elwood is the dragon girl Ninyan, which means Roy has dragon powers. I wish they realized that when they made this game, because nothing indicates that whatsoever. But it would have been really cool if he had like fire breath or something. He does uniquely have the power to wield the Sword of Seals, because of course he does, he's a protagonist.
Yeah.
Which is what he uses to not kill the dragons, he has to seal them, because he's also a hero. And that's how you get the secret ending, is you have to get all of the ultimate weapons of the 8 whatevers that did this in the past, and then you have to kill the final boss with the Sword of Seals instead of a conventional weapon, because you want to seal the darkness away and make them a normal person dragon thing.
Okay.
Because, of course you do, it's a hero's tale.
Yeah.
But it nonetheless lends to the game, like, the mechanics being fun and interesting. We're getting really far into time. I didn't think this would take so long, so I'm going to kind of rapid fire go through the next couple of these. I don't think I'm going to talk about the 3DS games very much, because I feel like they've been talked to death. I'll gloss over them a little bit, but I really want to focus on the ones that people haven't heard on so much. So fortunately, now we're getting into the games that were released in the US. This one in the US is just called Fire Emblem. Its Japanese name is Fire Emblem Rekka no Ken, which is the Blazing Sword. So in this game, like I said, is a prequel where you play as... initially you play as Lyn for the prologue, who's one of the lords, but after you finish her prologue, you get 2 other lords, Hector and Elwood, which is something that I'm pretty sure is new to the series, is having 3, like, lose condition characters. If any of those 3 characters die, it's game over, as opposed to just, like, permadeath like it is for any other character. Mm-hmm. Without going too deeply into the plot, because I do want people to play this, I think this game is the only one with a plot that compares to Genealogy. A lot of the characters are... and this is the game that I compare to Awakening when I complain about Awakening's characters being, like, just anime tropes and stuff. A lot of the characters in this game are just knights who have some kind of struggle. For example, Lowen's just like a new knight who's wrapped up in a war he has no business being a part in. And you have Sane and Kent, who are just like rookie knights who are like having to rise to the challenge out of nowhere. And a lot of characters who are just like thrown into this warped battle that they just like really should not be the people fighting and have to like contend with that and find a way to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Awakening, your character's motivations are, I think the protagonist is cute, or haha, I'm clumsy.
Yeah.
And obviously it is more than that when you go into the support conversations. They do typically have interesting characters. But in Fire Emblem 7, Rekino-Ken, the first one in the US, all those characters have very forward, very surface level motivations that are all like pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. A lot of the characters are like, you know, turned away by their evil empire that they served, who originally had a heroic leader, and they're like struggling, deciding if they want to defect and join your army or not, or they're struggling if they want to like risk their family being murdered for their heresy or something.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of that when you recruit the characters. Isn't just like, hey, you're cool, or hey, I have no motivation, I'm just here.
Yeah.
And it's a finesse that I think has recently been lost to Fire Emblem, and it's sad. It makes me unhappy. But anyway, in this game, you some guy is making a Full Metal Alchemist like style. What do they call it? Homunculi.
Yeah.
He's creating these characters who are just hyper strong characters, trying to kind of replicate and emulate the previous 8 heroes, so that he can do something and take over the continent. He wants to get revenge on something or somebody, and you meet someone called the Arcsage, who was his old mentor, and it turns out they're like 1,000 years old. So he wants to summon the dragons to take over the world and burn it to ash because humans don't deserve it and so forth. It's very, very similar to 6's plot, understandably because it is a prequel, but it also sets the stage for a lot of stuff in 6. There is a chapter in Fire Emblem 7 where you have to stop the enemy group of characters from assassinating young King Zephiel, who becomes the antagonist in 6. So if you just let him die, 6 would have never happened. But you can't because it's lose condition.
Yeah.
Because the world going to shit is canon. Otherwise, we see a lot of the traditional stuff. The weapon triangle that's become really notorious in the series. Weapon degradation is back. Things like that. It's a very tried and true entry-level Fire Emblem that's just very well-rounded in its plot, and I think it has some of the strongest characters in the franchise. So after this, we have Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, which is 8, which is also for the GBA, like the last 2 were, which is the one that you've played.
Yeah.
So 42 minutes in, you can finally say something, Dan.
Ooh, Sacred Stones is cool.
Yeah, it's a good game. It's a good game. It's easy. I recently played it this past summer, and I played it for 92 hours because I beat it 3 times. I beat it on both routes, and then I beat it on one of the same routes again because I felt like it.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to get all the support conversations and stuff. So in this game, you have the dual protagonist thing going on with Ephraim and Erica. And it's another situation where you have members of royal households who get access to uniquely powerful weapons and so forth, which isn't actually like partial to the game. So you remember early on, you have Joshua, the Myrmidon?
Yeah.
The one with the red hair. He's actually a prince, and he's part of the bloodline who has access to the sword Aldoma. But he's not the only one who can use it. You can just give it to Ross if you want. That's the guy with the hatchet.
Yeah.
That's his name. You can just give it to whoever, as long as they have a high enough sword rank, which is kind of...
Weird.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's fine for balance reasons, because it makes everybody good instead of just royal characters.
Yeah.
Which is a problem that we're going to see in one of the next games. But, I don't know, on one hand, I really like that it makes all of the characters usable, at worst acceptably good, and if not great. But I do kind of dislike that like everyone's just kind of interchangeable. You can beat this game with pretty much any cast of characters, which would be a good thing if I weren't like privy to the idea of characters actually just being stronger because the story dictates that they are. Sacred Stones has a pretty traditional plot, like rise up against the guy who's possessed by the evil thing who becomes a demon thing and then kill him and save the guy somehow.
Yeah.
It's a nothing special plot. The characters are not quite as good as 7, but I think they're still good. They start to get into the tropiness, though. Like, remember Lute the mage with the purple hair?
Yeah.
How her personality is quiet and likes books.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all it ever is.
Yeah, which is the same as the personality of the Mage in Awakening. Like,
Yep.
exactly the exact same.
Muriel, I think.
Yeah. Yep. Exact same character. Except, like, Lute has kind of an interesting backstory, whereas Muriel just sucks. So, we move on now to Path of Radiance for the GameCube, which is the game that Ike originates in.
And he fights for his friends.
He does. He doesn't... He says that one time. So, I think Ike is the most badass Fire Emblem character.
He fights for his friends.
No, I'll tell a story when we get to the sequel about why I think Ike's the best. But in this game, you have in the background story these 4 characters called like the you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. My phone just like fell off of my lap onto the floor, but it's fine.
Okay. So you have the 4 riders of Dayan, who were the coolest, baddest guys around 20 some odd years ago, and Ike's dad was one of them, Grail. Mm-hmm. This game's also just a huge allegory for Arthurian legend.
Yeah.
So, Ike's dad is a real big badass who later gets killed by a Black Knight, whose name is the Black Knight.
Of course.
You don't find out who that character is until the sequel, which is one of the reasons why I appreciate these 2 games in particular, is because it deliberately saves like plot material for the sequel.
Yeah.
So, you play as Ike's band of mercenary dudes who get hired by the Princess of Crimea, the real country, to
So Crimea exists in Fire Emblem, but no other like real world country does, right?
Yeah, except this game's total. It's an allegory for the Crimean Wars, obviously. Like,
Yeah.
not even making the shadowest of an attempt to hide it. But it's fine because it lends to the game's plot like serviceably well.
Okay.
So Ike's band of ragtag mercenaries have to go and like stop internalized racism against wolf people and furries.
Great.
Because it does have like kind of the like Germanic hatred of such and such group going on.
Yeah.
Where everyone calls these creatures subhumans, who are their proper name is the Lagus, and they're wolf dudes, bird dudes, and dragon dudes. Mm-hmm. Who are all immensely powerful, and you end up being like, because Ike's kind of like the naive, grew up under Grail, who is like the coolest dude ever. He never experienced this like racism towards these creatures or people or both. So when he meets one, they're just like, "Oh, you're just gonna hate us," and he's just like, "No, why would I do that? You've got wings. That's dope." And he just befriends them, and he ends up being like the bridge between like even the good countries, Crimea and Begnion and stuff, who like support them, but like only kinda. He ends up like bringing them into those countries and making them like proper citizens and stuff through his antics, basically. His like weird
That's
subplots
cool.
where he like fights a fat dude who likes heron people, because I guess he's also a furry.
Okay.
And you'll end up meeting like the members of the royal families of all of these animal human tribes, which is really cool because they're way the shit stronger than Ike. And like Ike just goes up to the king of the dragons and he's just like, "Hey, fix my boat," and he's just like, "No," and he's like, "I'll kill you." The game ends on like kind of a high note where you just like, yay, everybody wins, and you overthrow the evil king who did terrible transmutations or something with some random villain. And it just like it leaves a lot out in the open. Like you've killed the Mad King, but also like, why was Begnion kind of sketchy, and what's going to happen to Dayan now that their king is dead and there's no one to take his place. So we move on to the sequel, Radiant Dawn, where you also play as Ike, but not for a while. You start out playing as a character named Micaiah, who is a... I'm not going to spoil the plot for this either, but she's, as far as you know, a resident of Dayan, just like some person who lives there. And she's teamed up with a character named Soth, who was one of the thieves from Path of Radiance, who's now like a grown-up, handsome man instead of a small child.
Okay.
And you're trying to like basically bring order back to the country through like your ragtag group of like shitty mercenaries, where Soth has like a complex about Ike where he wants to like make his group as strong as Ike's was, and he wants to compare to his hero and so forth.
Yeah.
And you end up meeting the person who is supposed to be the proper like prince, and you're trying to get him into the seat of power by teaming up with the Black Knight and a couple of other Lagus and overthrowing the current's whoever's in charge, the evil senators and Emperor Palpatine.
Okay.
And this game is split off into 5 parts where you play as this group, which is the Dawn Brigade. The next group you play as is the Crimean Knights. So you reuse the characters from Path of Radiance because you have Jeffrey, Kieran, Oscar, Astrid, and some shitty guy with a pink afro.
Okay.
And you're fighting in the Queen's army to repel the evil empire, whichever one it is this time. In Chapter 3, you are Ike's mercenary group again, and now Ike's big. Now he in 2 years he grew like 8 inches and got 100 pounds of muscle.
Sick.
So now he's teamed up with his big buff mercenary group, and you're trying to save the Crimean army, and you end up getting into this battle with gods and goddesses and so forth, where you need to kill the goddess of order to save chaos because that's what makes the world work or something.
Okay.
This game brings back the 3-tiered promotions, but it doesn't suck now because it's just like you promote and then you get a flat boost to your stats instead of jumping up to their bases. So this game does have an issue with balance though, because not all characters, because you're playing as like 3 groups of people and then you have a chapter where you play as all of the groups but split into 3 armies, you don't get a lot of the characters for very long. When you get Ike, he's close to being able to promote into his 3rd tier. When you get Fiona, she's like in her 1st tier, not even a 4th of the way to the next one, and you only get her for like 3 chapters.
Strange.
So there's a lot of characters that there's just no way you're going to get to use them unless you like totally sacrifice everybody else to do, which you can, because at endgame you also team up with all of the royals from all the Lagu's armies. So you get the Prince of the Dragons, you get the King of the Hawk tribe and the King of the Crow tribe, you get like the 3 Herons, you get all their advisors, you get the King of the Lions and stuff like that, and they just all team up, and half of your party going into endgame should be comprised of these characters who start able to kill the final boss. So yeah, you've got like 60 or 70 other characters that you have to train up to get to endgame. But like, if you literally use nobody but the royals, you should still be able to manage. You can reasonably solo the finale with Ike. He's unbelievably strong in this game, which is why I think he's the coolest ever. There's a chapter in this game where it's like a really big, like, it's like the final battleground against the evil enemy army before it becomes a battle against like gods and stuff. Mm-hmm. And somebody put Ike to sleep with the sleep spell, so he's just like standing up with a sword like limp at his side and his head's down, and somebody comes up with an axe, and when you're asleep they have a 100% chance to hit you because you can't dodge, obviously.
Yeah.
So this dude runs at Ike with an axe, swings, and if you don't do any damage, the assumption is that you're an armored character, like a knight or something, and it bounced off your armor, but Ike's not wearing armor. So the axe did 0 damage, hit Ike square in the head, and just went ting, and just bounced off. and Ike just woke up the next turn and just like looked at him and was like, just kills him in one slash.
Nice.
Oh, it was so funny. Like, obviously, like, a lot of that was hyperbolic, but like, just the context of someone hits him with an axe and it bounces off his head like metal.
Yeah.
So the next game is Shadow Dragon, which I've already basically finished going over, comparing it to Anko Koryu. Uh-huh. The game after that is Shinmachi no Nazo, which didn't come out in the US. It's New Mystery of the Emblem, and it's a remake of Fire Emblem 1. But it's only a remake of the 2nd book. Okay. Which is for the best, because we didn't need a remake of the remake of the remake.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this didn't come out in the US. Shadow Dragon just didn't do very well here for some reason. And this game probably wouldn't have either, so as far as sales go, that was probably a reasonable choice, but it still makes me upset. Yeah. After that, we start to get into, and let me look up this director's name because I can't remember either. The guy who made Awakening and Fates was Kohei Maeda, and I don't much care for this man's work. Awakening, I feel like, is where... So Fire Emblem was on the decline, kind of worldwide. It just wasn't really popular anywhere anymore. And I don't know why. I think it had a lot to do with just poor marketing. I don't know if you've ever seen the Fire Emblem 7 commercial in the US, but it's horrid.
I have not.
They think it's Vikings. It's like a bunch of people sitting around like a Norse hall, like in Valhalla or something, and like, you know, smashing beer glasses together and stuff. And then it shows the gameplay, and I'm like, that's not what's happening.
Okay.
Look that up if you get a chance, listeners, and you too, Dan, when we're done.
Yeah.
So Awakening, I don't want to say that it like tropifies the series, because Awakening does have its good points, but it lacks a lot of the finesse that the previous games does. It's not subtle. The map design's really poor. There's not a lot of like use of terrain that you can manage. It is closer to an RPG than a strategy game. You win with levels instead of like skillful thought. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the difficult things that you can do in the game, like the really hard DLC, like Apotheosis and stuff, is flat out impossible to do on like the hardest run or whatever, without just like min-maxing and level grinding and like doing this and that to get these skills on these characters and stuff, and it just ends up not really fun for me, I think. It becomes too much of like, it's like Dragon Quest level of grinding, but like none of the payoff are fun. A lot of the characters I don't really care for. I think the children mechanic is an interesting throwback to Genealogy, and you also get skills in this game, which is also a throwback to Genealogy. The Ike games also had that, I guess, so I guess that's not true. But I don't know, like the characters just don't have any of the interesting qualities that they did in previous games, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, and I do think that Awakening was kind of a necessary evil, because it is what saved the franchise. Like Fire Emblem probably wouldn't exist right now if Awakening didn't do as well as it did.
Yeah.
So I have trouble accepting it because I don't think it's good, and I think it's turning the series down a bad path. But at the same time, the alternative is Fire Emblem not existing anymore.
Do you think that some of the problems with like the characters being kind of tropey is a localization thing? Since that's kind of
not in Awakening. In Fates, yes, definitely.
Yeah. ...
Yeah. ... The worst support conversation in history. However, that might be an in-joke. Because there was a joke on the Serenus Forest, which is the message boards for Fire Emblem. There was a joke on there where two characters, Wrath and somebody else I can't remember offhand, were like the two quiet characters of the game, and they didn't have a support conversation together, but somebody made a mock one where their interaction is just them like saying ellipsis to each other. And so maybe it's a reference to that, but I think that's giving them too much credit.
But maybe it's also just Nintendo's localization team now is kind of...
Yeah, maybe they're just actually that terrible.
I think, yeah.
If it's not that, Izana's dialogue, or Izuna, or whichever it is, the we're nothing but love, peace, and chicken grease guy, which is the worst line of dialogue in any Fire Emblem game in history.
There's also Rajat, who's just Tharja, just literally Tharja.
Yeah, and they have Asugi, who's Gaius, and they have whatever is just Cordelia.
Yeah.
It's
literal reskins, but
well, and then there in the other game there are three characters who literally are the characters from Awakening who went through a portal and changed their names.
Yeah.
Laszlo is just Inigo, Odin is just Owain, and Selena Sabera.
Mm-hmm.
Does that matter at all, or are they just there?
Their support conversations allude to it, but no, like in the context of the game, it doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is weird because they're also working for the game's implied evil army, despite the fact that they were like heroes in the previous game. So it's really weird.
Yeah. Oh, Awakening and Birthright from Fates are the two that I've played, and I think I've played part of one of the Game Boy Fire Emblems. I don't remember which, because I got to the first fight and I think I lost somebody and I cried and I stopped playing. Because permadeath is like the one thing that's really stopping me from playing some of the older Fire Emblems. Because
Oh, that's right, because you can turn off permadeath in the new ones.
Yeah, you can, which is awesome.
And that actually started in Shinmonshi no Naza, but it never came out in the US, so nobody knows that.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where I don't want to feel like I'm wasting time like I don't like to feel like I'm wasting my time when I play games. And then when it gets to Fire Emblem, I don't want to waste time when it comes to leveling up characters. I want to have them die because I'm kind of bad at planning. My play style is not very conducive to the way that you have to play most of the older Fire Emblem games.
And that's also an issue with older Fire Emblems, and this is something that I do give Shin Mantra credit, but also Awakening, because it does let you adjust whether it's permadeath or not, and that's something that I think the franchise did actually need.
Absolutely.
Because even when I play old Fire Emblem games, if someone dies, I just reset it.
Yeah.
Because you can get yourself into an unwinnable state if all of your good characters die, and you just like have only shitty characters who can't level up without dying against the enemies.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's sort of the issue with, like, a lot of games with permadeath is, they assume that you reset as far as, like, scaling difficulty goes.
Yeah.
And you're at, like, a, like, almost unwinnable disadvantage if you don't reset. I think some of the XCOM games actually do this pretty well, where, like, advancing individual characters is, like, really useful because they become, like, significantly more powerful as the game goes on. But also, you just, like, have better technology, and you can bring along people who are new, like, especially if, like, you know, some of your, like, veterans have died, and, like, they will perform at a decent level, at least. Like, they won't have, they won't be exceptional, but, like, they can do basic stuff. And, like, they can do damage and survive.
And Fire Emblem tries to do that, because Fire Emblem will usually give you a new character every chapter, who may or may not be a good character, but they'll usually be sufficient for dealing with the chapter that they appear in.
Yeah.
For example, in Fire Emblem 6, there's like a pretty difficult chapter with a bunch of pirates, but you can recruit a character named Geese, who's like not incredible for the rest of the game, but he's pretty good on that chapter. So you're usually given the tools to at least deal with the situation you're in. But then when you get to that difficulty spike of endgame, if you didn't bring a good group of characters with you, the characters they give you at endgame usually are not good enough to beat the final boss with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where permadeath is cool for story purposes, but then also, like, can really fuck you over. And I'm also just a really sentimental person when it comes to, like, video game characters. Like, I finished Awakening with, like, Vake still in my party and everything, and I know that he's not, like, the best choice, but he was also a tank for, like, most of my playthrough. And Awakening has been one of the few games that, like, I've played through multiple times on various difficulty levels. Like, it was the first game, I think, or one of the first games that I finished on, like, the very hardest.
On Lunatic?
Yeah. Which took forever to do because I'm really bad at planning.
Well, that, and again, because it's not a very strategic focused game, and because Fire Emblem games also do have random level ups, not fully random, like every character has a % chance to gain each stat, which is totally character dependent. Like, the implication is, like, Cavaliers will get, like, defense and strength and skill and speed about equally, but they're all varied depending on which Cavalier you're using. But you can also just, like, usually what determines a good character in Fire Emblem is if their starting stats are good, and if the likelihood of them being a good character later on is good because of their growth rates. Oftentimes you'll get a character who has, like, piss poor stats, but has really good growth, so if you can just nudge them along long enough, they'll end up good. But you always run that risk of them just getting really unlucky. Because 90% chance to raise your strength still isn't 100. And I've had runs where, like, the best characters in the game are unusable because they just gain bad stats.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and I like Fire Emblem a lot, but I hate randomness, especially in strategy games. I think it's completely counterintuitive to the point of a strategy game.
Yeah.
My example for Fire Emblem is always criticals. I think are a horrible, horrible design mechanic for this game, because more than once I've been playing Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, and I've had Ephraim, like, guard a doorway in a defense chapter, trying to prevent enemies from getting to a throne. And Ephraim can usually take 1 or 2 hits before he goes down, because he's, like, strong, but he's not, like, he's no general, he's no armor knight. And an enemy will hit Ephraim. Ephraim will get a critical and kill them, so now another enemy can get in when before they wouldn't have been able to. They kill Ephraim and I get a game over. Because I hit a critical.
Yeah.
And that's stupid. Like, if you're gonna do something like that, like, prompt me and say, like, do you want to kill this guy and guarantee that your character dies?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like comparing it to XCOM, because Fire Emblem is very different because there are characters who must survive no matter what because they're like story essential characters, and there are characters who are like non-story essential, but they're also like still like specific characters to the story. Whereas in something like XCOM, everyone is just a soldier.
Yeah.
And
if one of them dies, whatever.
Then you like the next one falls in line and you continue on.
Whereas in Fire Emblem, if you lose all your Pegasus Knights, there aren't any more Pegasus Knights.
Yeah.
Or if you lose Merrick, there goes your best mage for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I found myself hardly ever using mages, at least in Awakening. I used, I think I had like my ace tactician was essentially the only mage I had because they're all so squishy.
And you can just choose to make your tactician not squishy.
Yeah, and my tactician was like buff as hell, and also paired up with Crom, who would usually take most of the damage.
And that's another thing that was introduced in the 3DS games was the pair up too.
Yeah, which was awesome, having them on the same tile, moving together, especially when they have different speeds. I would usually stick a pretty slow unit as the support for like one of the horse units, so I could move them across.
And then swap, and then get the strong guy to attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super
See, that was
nice.
really cool for strategies like that, but it, like, completely broke the game.
Absolutely.
Because I killed the final boss in one round by pairing up Crom with Sumia, and I just stuck them together. Sumia had Gale Force, which is when you kill an enemy, you get to move again. So I flew up, killed an enemy, which let me move to the final boss, swapped to Crom, who just killed him in one hit.
Good. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, like, also going back to me being, like, really sentimental about really dumb things, I never changed Crom's sword, ever.
You also don't need to, because Crom's
Yeah.
broken.
Yeah, absolutely, which is, I love Crom.
I hate Crom, he's the worst.
I had to actually, in order to see other support conversations, I had to stop playing as a girl, because I would just marry Crom every time.
Yeah. And that's another thing is Awakening brings back the children mechanic from Genealogy.
But it works a lot better than it does in Fates.
It does work better because it doesn't work at all in Fates.
Yeah, at least like the story implication in Awakening makes sense because it is a really big part of the story. Whereas in Fates, it's let's put them in the baby portal, which is also really dangerous.
Yeah, because there are demons there.
Yeah, in order to get the kids on your army, you have to go into the baby portals.
The baby portal.
Yeah, but it doesn't make any sense in the context of the game because it's like your characters get married, have a baby immediately, stick them in the baby portal, and in 10 minutes they're a grown adult and you have to go save them from monsters.
Yeah, it's weird.
Like, it doesn't make it, because in Awakening, the characters were coming from the future, which is like blah, future time travel, gameplay, story element, whatever, it's usually bad. But like, it was at least like a central part of the game. Like, you got Lucina one way or another.
Yeah, you got Lucina because she traveled back in time and then brought like kids with her.
Yeah, because like, future apocalypse Terminator stuff.
Yeah.
They send Lucina back with the T-800 and
The T-8 Falcon.
Yeah. And the story actually is conducive to like having the children be from the future, which makes sense because you're not like Vake and Muriel aren't like having a kid and then sticking them in an oven and then it comes out and it's an adult. It leads to some really sad implications of like your child is the same age as you, like you watch or sometimes older.
Yeah, you watch them
because like Rickon's child is almost always older than him.
Yeah, Rickon's child is also so aggravating. Like, it's great that Fire Emblem lets you be gay, kind of. In Birthright, you can, if you're a girl, you can marry a girl. And then in Conquest, you can,
you can marry Niles.
Yeah, you can marry Niles if you're a dude. Which is really cool because Niles is like a character who's there from the beginning, pretty much. Yeah. But in order to get to Rajat, who's the girl you can marry, you have to marry off Rickon, and then her quest or her paralogue or whatever, super fucking hard.
Or not Rickon.
Not Rickon?
Rickon's an
Oh,
awakening.
no. Shoot. It's the Rickon of the game,
Yeah,
though. The baby mage.
Hayato.
Yeah. You have to marry him off.
Yeah, you have to marry off Rickon not wearing a hat with somebody else, and then that produces Rajat, and then you can marry Rajat.
Yeah, and then you have to do her paralogue first, and her paralogue is hard as fuck.
And also, you're marrying a space baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's also really creepy.
Yeah.
Like, unnervingly so. Like, Tharja was kind of like, a little much. But
Yeah.
then
Love
Rajat is
murder.
just...
Yeah,
Rajat
but
is
that's a lot of the problem with
worse.
Awakening is like that's all the character tropes. Like Henry's like battle quote is just like yeah blood, and I'm like okay your character is psychopath. I got it already.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why I think adding voice acting to Fire Emblem was a mistake. at least adding it at the same time that they decided to go on the route with Awakening's character design that they did, because it really just like shut the fuck up, Vake.
I don't think I married Vake to anybody. He was a bachelor. But yeah,
I like how you can marry your tactician in Awakening to Gangrel, the villain, or Walhart, the villain, because you can get them in paralogs.
I don't like that. Is it one of them is your dad?
Well, your dad is a demon dragon,
Yeah.
Huh.
but Valadar is your, I think, actual like father,
Okay.
and he's not a recruitable character. I don't think.
Good.
But you can, in Awakening, marry, or you can recruit Priam, who is Ike's descendant, and actually comes with Ike's sword Ragnell, and is also wearing Ike's bandana, which means, because this wasn't terribly clear before, the Fire Emblem plot lines are interconnected,
Yeah.
which is kind of just like headcanon fan stuff, but it's also kind of interesting that they're like lending some credibility to that. Previously, we knew that 2 and 1 were related because it had characters overlap. 4 and 5 were direct sequels to each other. Sacred Stones was nowhere to be seen in the timeline, and 6 and 7 were connected. And we knew that Awakening was a distant sequel to the Marth games,
Yeah, 'cause
because the Hero
Lucina.
King Marth, and Lucina was supposed to be Marth and stuff. But the continent where you fight Walhart's army in Awakening is the same continent that Gaiden takes place on,
Okay.
which means there might be some ties to Awakening and the Marth games and stuff in the remake of Gaiden.
Probably. We'll have to see if the treehouse doesn't bastardize it
If
too
they don't
much.
know as much about Fire Emblem as I do, because I should be doing the localization,
If they just don't decide to throw in burrito jokes and really weird.
and just make a character Deadpool or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, please find a new localization team.
Yeah.
I don't like to like broadcast my like negative opinions of people's work, but like I really do not like the localization of Fire Emblem Fates one bit.
Yeah. If Nate Bildorf is listening to this, stop with the fucking burrito jokes. Knock it off.
Who was the? And there was a character in Fates whose entire personality was pickles.
I
Yeah.
don't fucking remember.
It was some girl. She loved pickles.
No, it was one of the samurai dudes.
Oh, okay.
I really don't remember much of Birthright. The only reason I played it was because I really liked the way that Awakening played, and I just skipped through the story because it was dumb.
Yeah.
I still think it's dumb. I still
The
haven't
story
finished
and the story and I haven't played Revelations because I don't know where my copy of Birthright went, and I had the digital version of Conquest, so I just until I find that I can't access Revelations anyway. But honestly, I don't miss it that much because I know I'm not gonna like it.
It's one of those things where I haven't Birthright from a storytelling perspective. I guess in case you didn't know this, listener, Birthright is with your real family, the good guys, and Conquest
As far as you know in the context of the two games.
yes, and Conquest is when you team up with the bad guys, quote unquote.
The adoptive family.
The adoptive family. And I hear that Conquest has a much better story. I don't know. I haven't played it.
No, it
well,
doesn't.
in comparison to Birthright.
No, it's actually worse than Birthrights.
Really?
Because the plot of Conquest is everyone knows your dad's evil, and they just keep doing horrible, evil things in his name, saying like, "Man, I wish we didn't have to do this."
Well, it's a little bit better than Birthright, which is we're the good guys.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Birthright's story is we're good, kill them.
Yeah, but Conquest has, because you're working with the bad guys, has to work a little bit harder
But it doesn't, though, is the issue. Like, it should, by all rights, be a more interesting story, but it's not.
But it's also one of those things where I was so bored with Birthright's story that the only thing that kept me going for as long as it did, and I still haven't finished it, was just the way it played. I really liked the way that Awakening played. And it's a reskin of Awakening, really, if you get down to it, with a different story.
And 6 of the characters are literally reskins.
Yeah. With a worse story and less Crom, which I didn't like.
So it's about, like, 20% better?
No, shut up, Casey. Crom
is the worst Fire Emblem. No, Corrin's the worst. Crom's the second worst protagonist.
Yeah, I like that when Corrin turns into a dragon, they walked on their fucked up knuckles.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Also, Corrin's a dragon. I don't think anybody in the story seemed to care about that.
Yeah, they were just like, oh, convenient.
Convenient.
Yeah, after you
saw... And also you got a magic sword out of a statue or something?
I don't remember. I really don't remember. I was so excited for Fates because I was really into Awakening. And I bought Birthright because that was the version that I was...
The easy one?
Well, it was the version I was told to get because it was similar to Awakening.
Because it had, like, free-form grinding and stuff like that.
Yeah, whereas Conquest is very much...
Conquest does, but it's harder to get to and more annoying.
Yeah. And I was just so disappointed.
Yep. I am also disappointed in 3DS games, and I hope someone's listening and yells at me in my email. Speaking of which, I think we should probably pull this to a close now.
Sounds good.
Anybody else have any, like, final thoughts?
No,
really.
I probably will play more Fire Emblem. It's just like I have a very aggressive play style. I'd rush in to things, which is why permadeath does not work very well for me. But
Play them on an emulator with save states.
I mean, yeah, essentially.
I mean, I own them all, so you can just pretend you're borrowing them from me.
Okay. Or alternatively, I'll play them like a normal person and just reset all the time, forever. And maybe I'll get good. Maybe it'll force me to be good.
Or you'll just reset until you win.
Yeah, which is actually more
Which is
likely
how I beat
to happen.
XCOM.
Yeah.
Which is the only way to beat XCOM.
Hey, XCOM's not that hard. Well, which one are we
XCOM
talking
2 is
about?
that hard.
Oh, okay. Yeah, XCOM 2's... Yeah. XCOM 2 is much more, like, reset heavy.
Yeah. Because it's also on a timer. Anyway, this isn't about XCOM. We'll talk about XCOM later. All right. Thank you for listening, everybody. I was Casey.
I was Daniel.
And I was Riva.
Cool. I was.
Follow us on our Twitter at Respawn Lounge.
It's respawn_lounge.
Not on Twitter.
Not on Twitter?
I don't think. Well, is
So
it?
we are.
The link will be in the YouTube description. So
Thanks, Dan.
believe that one.
Thanks, Dan. Follow us on Facebook, where I post questions that so far nobody answers, and you can find my Fire Emblem Heroes friend code if you want that. What else? Music was by Atrium __ on SoundCloud, who's actually moving all of his music over to a new account in the near future. And as soon as he does that, I will update all that information as well. Go to our website, which is respawnloungeofficial.wordpress.com, where every Tuesday somebody in this room will upload some piece about something, which is sometimes but usually not connected to what we talk about on the podcast that week. Follow us on YouTube, which is probably where you're listening to this, and that's where this podcast and all future podcasts will go up every Thursday at some time or another.
Yeah.
Think that's everything?
That's about everything.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, and good night.